You asked for it. Oh, so let's... Assassin Christmas. I need to stop saying that. That's become a bad habit. This video is powered by, as always, entertainment. If you enjoyed this content, consider becoming a patron over on patreon.com/asalways for access to the Patreon exclusive podcast, The Kill Connor Clubhouse, early access to the Cinema Room podcast, being part of polls for future videos, and other early access material. With that said, please enjoy the video. Alright, Christmas time, that's why I'm wearing the hat, there's that in the background. If you're not watching this at Christmas, then that's why we're doing Christmas. Assassin's Creed Ragnarok, I guess that is what we're talking about. Assassin's Creed Kingdom, Assassin's Creed Bloody Viking game. We're talking about that today. There's been a huge amount of leaks flooding the internet over the past couple of months. Tons of Assassin's Creed information, and I think the one that can be relied on the most is the Kingdom leak, but there has been some Ragnarok leaks that I think have some credibility to them. Oh, and I hate to say this, but the Spanish YouTubers may just be right. So look, I mean, listen, the one that was talked about, the one that was disputed is probably fake. But there's another one I found, or was linked to me. I didn't find it. I don't go looking for Assassin's Creed leaks. I think... honestly, I think it's true, actually. Alright, so leak number one, the one that we got that was, like, obviously not all there, but maybe some of it was, is the one that was posted to Assassin's Creed, the r/gaming leaks and rumors Reddit, which is immediately a fucking red flag. If you're posting a leak to a Reddit leak page, look, it just, they encourage fake let's get into this. Ragnarok Info, so it says, guess you all know about the next Assassin's Creed, and it's a Viking setting, so here's a bunch of infos about it. The leaker goes on to say, the game was codenamed Kingdom, but now is called Ragnarok, release of fall 2020 on both old and new gen. So far, nothing out of the ordinary. That all seems very legitimate, other than the fact that it's called Ragnarok. I hate that name. Ubisoft, if that is what you're calling it, you know, maybe... call it anything else, because that's terrible. That's a terrible name. Apparently, it's going to be revealed during a PlayStation event in February of 2020. And the Viking setting will be 800 BC, which would set it 400 years before Odyssey, and also Vikings weren't around in 800 BC. I'm gonna assume it means 800, not BC. Just at year 800. I'm going to assume that's what they mean by that, because otherwise, that makes no sense. I'm going to assume that was a mistake, purely because of the other leak that pops up. So let's hang on, let's keep talking. Let's keep talking about this. The map includes Scandinavia and a big part of England, including London and Plymouth. That's not how you spell Plymouth. It's fine. Choice between a woman and a man, but there's no impact on the story. It's the same protagonist, a woman or a male, and either way, they're both called Joraptor, because that's just what they're called. Apparently, you become an assassin during the game. Brotherhood system is back with recruitable NPCs. You can still use a boat to travel on the sea, but there is less naval combat than Black Flag or Odyssey, in my opinion. Useless. Story-wise, the game is focused on a revenge quest, always a strong plot for a Ubisoft game, with a big part of the first civilization story. Realms like Asgard or Jotunheim can be visited in the game. Mythical beasts mythical beags. What's a beag? Is that a real word? No, it's not a word. Mythical beings, such as Odin or Loki, play a part in the story, as well as Yggdrasil. Game has a present-day part, but as much as Origins or Odyssey. It will include the present-day storyline. Gameplay is the same as Odyssey, with improved mechanics and further RPG elements. I think a lot of that is probably true, and I think a lot of it is probably misinterpreted. I don't know. It's difficult to say, because working on a game is very different from understanding the game. Like, if you're just working on a game and it's not something you're incredibly passionate about, you might misinterpret certain elements, which makes it a little bit difficult. Apparently, this is going to conclude the present-day storyline. Thank God. Get it gone. Get it out of here. God, was an Odyssey a fucking train wreck. Now, if this leak is going to be taken to be true, the things that stand out as good are, like, you become an assassin. So we're playing as a fucking assassin. Good job. Secondly, Brotherhood system, good. How in-depth is it? Sounds more like the recruitment system from Odyssey. However, I have a theory about how this game is going to play out. And I think it builds off of the mercenary system and the Brotherhood system, combining them. And I have an idea. I'm going to talk about it in the next bit. Because it's interesting. It's interesting stuff, so stick around. Less naval combat, that's good, because Odyssey was just a lot of naval. Like, although it was a fun part of Black Flag, I don't think Odyssey was anywhere near as fun in terms of its naval elements, so good, get rid of those. Let's have more land-focused Assassin's Creed gameplay. Odin or Loki play a part in the story. I'm going to assume they're Isu in some regard, which is cool. It's always nice to see other parts, because we always saw the Roman gods, so whatever, if it doesn't fuck with lore, sure, whatever, interesting, fine, whatever, go for it. It's Ashraf, so whatever, do your thing. Present day is, has it, but it's not really there much, and it's gonna conclude the story, whatever, cool, whatever, get rid of it. Gameplay is the same as Odyssey with improved mechanics and further RPG elements. I think that's probably, I do not believe that Ashraf would make a game like Odyssey. So what I believe is it's Origins with improved mechanics and in developed RPG elements. I don't believe it's the same as Odyssey, because Odyssey's bad and Ashraf makes good games. So Scandinavia and England, that's fun, with London and Plymouth. That's cool. Location's cool. Go for it, whatever. Sick. Overall, the leak sounds very vague, but also, like, reading into this, honestly, kind of sounds real. The only thing throwing off is the date, which I believe, honestly, I believe is probably a typo, just based on this leak that we got 15 days ago. So, this leak was posted on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit by another user, I believe. And essentially, this guy has come along to clear things up. He's the Samaritan. He's come along and he's saying, there's a lot of crap being said on the next Assassin's Creed these few days, so let's talk some real stuff for once. He's mad. He's not happy. The game is indeed going to be called Ragnarok and set during the Viking era, during the first invasion of England, 9th century, which lines up. It's not 800 BC, it's just 800, so there you go, that makes a lot of sense. Probably be revealed during the Sony event in February, which a lot of leaks have been saying, so that lines up. Map will include Scandinavia and part of England, with London as a big city, as well as some English counties, which sounds believable, it sounds doable. There is a choice between a male and female protagonist, but this doesn't change the plot. Both are called Jorah. Protagonist went to England during the invasion and goes back to Scandinavia later after he becomes an assassin. Now, this is a point that I want to bring up. That sounds like an interesting story point, because it sounds almost a Black Flag-esque type deal where someone is a bad type of person, you're Viking, you're going and you're pillaging, you're raping, you're killing, that sort of thing. You then become an assassin, and that's when you then return to Scandinavia, and it's like, oh, now you're a changed guy, and you've got to deal with all of your Viking mates that are like, no, we need to rape, and you're like, no, maybe not. I don't know, I think that sounds reasonable and sounds like something that they would probably do. The game begins during the Battle of that's a word, where you raid an island and invade a castle. I mean, that's vague and unnecessary piece of information. Your protagonist has a very strong link with the gods, especially Odin. There are often visions of him and of Asgard. The first civilization plot will be further expanded in this game, with a lot of Norse gods being part of the game, as well as Yggdrasil and realms, which I believe that's probably a development over what they did with the DLC of Odyssey and what they did with the DLC of Assassin's Creed Origins in terms of having these various realms. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's an element of the main game in Assassin's Creed Ragnarok. We'll talk about my general thoughts on this direction at the end point, but that's what I think. Combat system brings back shields, so you can tell it's an Ashraf game, and you can use long swords or big axes, heavy weapons in general. Naval gameplay is here purely for exploration or in battles. You can't fight on the sea. That's an interesting piece of information. So there's not a great deal of naval combat. It's mostly for exploration. It's only for exploration, except for when you have specific battle segments, which doesn't sound too bad. There are still big battles, as there are in Odyssey, where you raid islands and take control of them. You must control them and try to keep them yours because they can be attacked. Now, that's the one I want to talk about after I've gone through this whole leak, and we'll go back to that in my theory about the way this game handles the big battles and the fort takeovers that were so prominent in Origins and Odyssey. The next point is that there are still superpowers, and I need you to stop and take those out immediately, because that's not Assassin's Creed, and I need them to go away. So please, yeah, let's... Dialogue choices are still in the game. Whatever, okay. Would have hoped for them not to be, but whatever. A compromise would have been to have dialogue options so you can elaborate on things you've been told about during dialogue sections, but not choices that inevitably change the outcome of quests or the game, because it's Assassin's Creed, and I think it just makes it cheapens the experience. You can recruit a lot of NPCs to join the Assassins like you did in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Again, it could be more similar to the Odyssey system, but again, I think this ties into the fort takeover, so I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You still have a pet bird to scan the map, but it's not an eagle anymore, it's a raven, so immediately, like, we're straying even further from Assassin's Creed. You play as an ancestor of Otzoberg, hostage of the Assassins. Some old characters come back, but present day isn't a big part of the game. That sounds reasonable because we know that Otzoberg has a lot of connection to Norse mythology, so that makes a lot of sense, and that would be probably reasonable that you've used his DNA and now you're reliving his memories, so might be why they set that up. Alright, so those are all the leaks that we know about so far. There's nothing really greatly tangible other than this intuition I have that Ash won't make an Odyssey. I personally believe, even if it goes down the RPG route, it'll be more of an Origins, and it'll have his flair in the way that he cares about making a meaningful experience. And so I think that Odyssey was an amplification of all of Origins' flaws without any of Origins' strong points. And I think that this game, whatever it be, whatever direction they take, although I am not, at the end of the day, a huge fan of the RPG direction that Assassin's Creed has been going in. I think in Origins, I think it was this change that could have worked moving forwards, and what they really needed to do moving forwards with the game is, you know, have a bike sequel where he does something else. He learns social stealth. There's more assassination missions that have more complexity to them, more black box missions, but combine that with these RPG elements that you've built. Allow for the Brotherhood system in there as well. Like, it needed that meld. It can't just be an RPG, but I understand that you no longer want to make these Assassin's Creed titles, but combine the two, surely. Origins to me was the first stepping stone to doing that. It was, let's make an RPG about the origin of the Assassins, but that story wasn't done, and the gameplay to me wasn't perfected in terms of Assassin's Creed enough. I feel like it needed those elements. It needed the social stealth. It needed the world interaction to be a bit more prominent, you know, in terms of blending with crowds and sitting on benches and things like that. The way that you feel a part of this world rather than just going from A to B to C doing things. On top of that, Odyssey just took it and just destroyed it. I don't believe that Ash wants to make an Odyssey 2.0. I believe he wants to dial it back whilst keeping things that maybe could have worked on paper and developing them into something more. Now let's talk about my theory for where they're going with fort assaults and Brotherhood system and keeping your forts. Okay. Shadow of War, I think, is where they're going with this, down that route. If we look at the mercenary system, it was the Nemesis system, but like, not really, because they die and they don't come back. What I think they're going to do is they're going to take what they did in Shadow of War, which is you can create your own army. So like, you would recruit orcs to fight on your side, and you've got this army of procedurally generated pretty much characters with their own personalities and their own name. And I mean, it works well, right? Like, that system makes a lot of sense, and I think it would work in an Assassin's Creed, especially a Viking Assassin's Creed, in terms of you're playing as this Viking assassin who can take over these forts, and you then have to hold those forts from potential Templar attacks. And what's going to happen is, you're going to attack a fort, you're going to take over that fort, say there's like 3 tiers to the fort assault, same as in Shadow of War. You then take out the boss of the fort, you install your own boss, your own assassin boss, leader, master assassin into that fort, and then you control that fort, which can then be attacked by other people, like it can do in Shadow of War, and then you can start a fort defense mission where you're defending the fort. And I think what that does is it adds more depth and what's the word? That's depth and context to the fort missions, because one of the things I hated the most in Origins and Odyssey, and more so in Odyssey because it became part of the main story, is these fort missions where you're going to forts like kill 3 captains, loot 4 chests, and that's it, and it's so mind-numbingly boring. But if you give it this context like you do in Shadow of War, where you've got this fort and you go and take it over for the assassins, you install your own guy, because you can go around and you can make these guys join the assassins, and then you've got these assassins that are part of your guild, and you can then install them. So like, you've got, here's the leader of this, here's the captain, here's the lieutenant, and they're in charge of these forts, and then you defend them against Templar attacks. To me, that is the only route they can be going with this. It's the only thing that makes sense upon reading this leak, and it combines the fort elements with the assassin elements from Brotherhood and Revelations and takes it to somewhere that's new. And I don't think that's intrinsically a bad thing, because it's not your general RPG mechanic. It's something that's a bit more deep than what they did in Assassin's Creed Odyssey with the mercenary system, which is so base level and boring and bland. What they're doing here, if this is what they're doing, is they're adding a lot more depth to these fort missions, which is these forts now serve a purpose. You're not just going in and completing objectives, you're going in and you're taking out key Templars that'll be on like your Templar map or whatever, like the same as where you go into Sauron's army and you can see, you know, which are the high-ranking orcs. You can see who the high-ranking Templars are. You take those out, you put your assassins in the place, and you capture this area. Maybe it brings in money for you. Maybe that's a good way of getting money, is you control these forts and these castles, and you keep control of them in order to gain more money, and keep your assassins in charge. And they'll be defending it. You can then join in and defend it with a fort defense mission. It gives so much more meaning to these forts, because there's just so many of them and they just had no meaning other than just gaining mindless XP and doing pointless, useless tasks. And it's much worse in Odyssey than it is in Origins, but it was a major flaw of Origin. But adding this context to it, I think, gives it a lot more. It makes it feel a lot more special. You can create your own narratives now at this point. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go off in my ship to this area. Oh, this fort is over here. Let's get my assassins. Let's take over this Templar fort. And let's put my own assassins in charge. These assassins that you've recruited by yourself that have their own personalities, the same as the orcs in Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor. And I think I've been saying for a while, the Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor, I've been saying it since fucking Assassin's Creed Unity was coming out. That system works for Assassin's Creed because you have these procedurally generated Templar infrastructures, these Templar hierarchies that are procedurally generated, and they'll work because procedurally generated off the top of your head, you think, oh, that's gonna be a mess. But it works in the Middle-earth game. So why would it not work here? You could have this hierarchy of Templar infrastructure and these different forts, and then you can take control. You know which Templars to take out. You can then recruit assassins to your cause, and you've got this back and forth continuously, this real-time back and forth continuously that's happening within the world that you can interact with and be a part of and feel like you're in charge of. And it's completely separate from the main story and all the other quests and elements in the game. And I think it's something that Odyssey almost tried to do, but it just felt so disconnected, so bland, so vapid. But I think that if anyone's going to be able to achieve that, it's Montreal. And I think that they're gonna manage to do it just right. Especially because when you look at Odyssey, you've got these big battles. When you've got like the Spartans versus the Athenians or whatever it fucking was. I don't remember, that game sucked. I don't give a shit. You've got those battles, and then midway through the battle, a mercenary shows up, and oh look, that's meant to be meaningful, but it's not, because you have no connection to these mercenaries and they have no connection to the battle that's taking place. The battle had no build up. There's nothing there to connect these elements. They're all just things. They're all just ideas that Quebec went, let's put them in the game. But I think that what Montreal is doing is they're connecting all of these elements, giving them more depth and giving them context in the world. That means that you can form your own stories with what you're doing. So, like I said, taking over these forts, recruiting assassins, taking out major Templar installments, and there's this hierarchy that's a side thing in the game that's heavily worked on and integrated into the world. Beside that, you've then got all of your side quests. Hopefully they're structured a little bit better. You know, we want more in-depth stories, character-driven stories. Look at The Witcher 3. When you go and get these stories, like, they're mostly centered around dialogue, around character, around interaction, rather than go to a fort and take over the fort, rescue a guy from a camp. Like, no, it should be about investigation. It should be about talking to these people. It should be about going into, it's like, go to this nearby city and talk to this guy. He might be able to lead you in the way of this particular guy that you've got to kill. Maybe you have to investigate this guy. Maybe there's quests that link to the Nemesis system. So you go to, say you're in Scandinavia and you go to like a main like city or village or town or whatever. You're in there and like you go to a tavern or whatever and you talk to somebody in there. They give you information that can lead you to one of these major Templar targets that are part of the Nemesis system. That is a different way of tackling it. You could do it in the normal way and track them down yourself, or you've got this piece of information like a random tip-off that's just there. And I think that's something they're probably going to go for, is this procedurally generated quests. That's what I think they're going to go for with this game, purely because it makes sense to go down this route. If this is where, like, I don't know what it is, but reading this, it leads me to believe it's It's going down that Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War route more so than like a Witcher 3 route. But there's still those underlying elements there, and I think Ash being in charge of this is going to knit all of these elements so well together that it is a very fun game in the Assassin's Creed universe. Like I've said, my ideal Assassin's Creed game is an Ezio trilogy game. It's a Unity, it's a Black Flag, you know? It's story-driven open world game that is split up into different chapters, into different sequences, where you're playing as this established assassin. There's no choices, you can't change the outcome of things. It's integrally linked to the modern day storyline, these two parallel running stories. You have sequels for these characters, and you have your progression is not linked to the amount of XP you can get, the amount of enemies you can kill, the amount of bosses you defeat, the amount of forts you take over, but the progression you make through the story, your character that you follow over multiple years in their life develop, and the gameplay changes the older they get and the more experiences they have, and the story pushes them further, not the amount of XP you have to buy things in a menu. Story-driven, more linear experience is what I want from Assassin's Creed. Games that focus on social stealth, on complex parkour systems, and on black box assassination missions where you have to use your brain and strategize to take out targets. That's Assassin's Creed. Like, the identity of Assassin's Creed was what they went for from Assassin's Creed 1 through to Syndicate, and then they changed that with Origins, and I felt like they needed to throw in some more Assassin's Creed elements, but they just never did that, and I don't think this game is going down that route necessarily, but it's trying its best to appease, I think, all of the audiences that Assassin's Creed has built up. It's Ubisoft's fault for wanting to flip-flop and change things. It's Ubisoft's fault for going, Unity flopped, therefore scrap that and make Witcher clone, which was not really the right thing to do. A lot of people I've seen say that Assassin's Creed Unity, I defended it when it came out, you lot said it sucked, it's your fault that they decided to change, but Unity deserved all of the criticism that it got. The issue is that Ubisoft did the wrong thing with that criticism. Response to the criticism should have been to develop further, to double down on this, to give the next game more time and work on this to be something more and better than what Unity was on release. Instead of that, they decided to give Syndicate off to Quebec to finish quickly and then to change the game entirely into Assassin's Creed Origins. And I don't want to diminish what Assassin's Creed Origins did. I absolutely love Assassin's Creed Origins. I'll stand by that to this day. But the direction, especially after Odyssey, is not what I want. It's not Assassin's Creed, and it's a shame. But I think that after gaining all these various audiences, Assassin's Creed has had so many different iterations at this point. You've got your naval games, your RPG games, your linear experiences, your more Hitman-esque games, your funny games. There's so much to Assassin's Creed now that I think Ashraf I don't envy his position at all. He's trying to make a game that develops on Origins and Odyssey's success, because although I personally believe, the reason I believe this is because Ashraf makes good games. Ashraf knows good games. There's no way he likes Odyssey, and that's just my opinion. And so I believe that there's no denying Odyssey was a financial success. Obviously Ubisoft can be like, look, we can't just turn our back on that. You've got to do more of that. So I think he's trying his best to do that, whilst also trying to appease Assassin's Creed fans. And I love the bloke, I really do. And I think that although this information, if it's true, sounds a bit hit and miss, some of it sounds interesting, some of it sounds fucking bad, but I respect this guy enough to give him the benefit of the doubt, to go into this and see what this game has to offer when we see it announced apparently in February, when we see it at E3, and when it launches. I am gonna give him the benefit of the doubt that he's gonna make a fucking good game out of this, because Ashraf has never not, and now he's in a creative position. He's not game director anymore, he's creative director. He has a lot more sway over what they're doing and the general direction. And I love Black Flag, I love Origins, and I want to love Ragnarok. Cautiously optimistic, because I love Ashraf and his games, and I hope that this is a killer game. I really, really do. I don't think we're ever going to really see another Assassin's Creed game again, in the sense of it being an Assassin's Creed title. I mean, I could be totally wrong. When this game comes out, maybe it actually has assassination missions. Maybe it's heavily focused on Brotherhood. Maybe, it does all those elements right. Maybe the parkour system is improved to the point where there's a bit more complexity to it, because Origins and Odyssey's parkour system was complete shit. Maybe that is the case. Maybe that is the case, and I hope that it is. And I trust Ash enough that I will reserve judgment for when we see the game in a little while. That's personally what I think. And I know I've rambled on for a long fucking time. And I know you probably love it, so that's fine. Talking about Assassin's Creed. And that's all I'm ever going to say until the game is officially announced. So thank you so much, unless obviously I'm streaming and someone asks me and I'm like, oh, yeah, let's just chat about it. But yeah, that's all you're going to get out of me. And it's thanks to the advent calendar that you got this video. If you want to check out the other advent calendar videos, the links are all down. The link is down below to the playlist where I'm doing of all my other advent calendar videos. So go and check those out. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays, all that good stuff. And I'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the advent calendar. Thank you all so much for joining, and I'll see you all in a bit. Bye-bye.